To you once again. In the last hour, we actually talked about the impact that fuel price increases will have on, so many things. And now we're reporting that farmers are already complaining about this.
Yeah, look, I mean, that assumption makes sense, of course. Farmers themselves are going to have to be transporting, whether it be their crop, whether it be feed as well, to their crops. And as you heard from that incident not so long ago, it's going to be really, really deadly as to how exactly that begins to impact on South African consumers, because the draw-on effect later on onto the shop owners, everything from inflation, CPI, food inflation itself as well. And of course, the cost bearing on us consumers is going to be one that is bound to hurt. So yeah, certainly that issue is going to be very difficult to deal with. And let's remember that not so long ago we were dealing with a drought, which certainly hurt that food sector as well. So that food sector continuing to struggle and continuing to suffer, and that is just showing you the lagged effect of the petrol price hike, that it's not just for consumers' petrol costs and not just about our cars alone, but certainly about agricultural goods as well, about construction goods, about the delay perhaps in receiving items that we need. So that food sector will certainly begin to struggle.
Yeah, and Arabile, you've been stationed at that particular filling station for quite some hours now, and I believe you were able to have a chat with some motorists. What's the overall view and feel amongst motorists?
Yeah, I can tell you right now that motorists are absolutely furious. The situation here is one that allows one to understand and see the situation for themselves. 50 Rand at the very least if you have a 50-litre tank and you're filling it up with 95 unleaded petrol. That is the addition that you will be bringing to your fuel cost for at least this month alone. That situation could get even worse, with oil prices also expected to go up to at least $90 a barrel. Today hitting a 4-year high of around $85 a barrel. So clearly the inference here is that South Africans need to brace themselves for a situation that becomes even worse. A little earlier I had even spoken to the Department of Energy and wondered even whether it was prudent enough for them to have actually increased, or rather not increased, prices by the stipulated amount just last month in September, and giving us that reprieve where we saw petrol prices only increase by around 5 cents a litre, whereas this time around we get to suffer at the hands of that and even more of a bad news story when it comes to that oil price. Perhaps it really wasn't as prudent. They've already now depleted the funding and cannot help South African consumers again. So the situation is dire. Consumers here at this petrol station are certainly not happy and continue to ask government to step in one way or another. Whether they can do that, however, is a different story. And of course, as you've heard, Minister Jeff Radebe, the Minister of Energy, saying that it is very difficult for them to step in any further because the situation in itself is quite dire. So how will the funding model work if we were to help South African consumers? The midterm budget is not so far away, October the 24th. Maybe, just maybe, that might provide some answers.
And let's just bring that understanding, Arabile, to our consumers. Let's just make them understand as to why are we seeing so many, fuel price hikes this year. You were saying to me earlier on that we're looking at, 20 rands a litre towards the end of this year. But what are the contributing factors behind all of this?
Yeah, so let's remember the big things here. One, we have to import oil. So South Africa is a very, very big importer of oil, which then makes up the petrol, of course, in our country as well. The second major element here is the South African currency, and that currency to the US dollar. Why the significance of the currency is, remember that the oil price itself is measured in the US currency, that's in dollars, and we then have to buy it in US dollars, which means that we first have to convert South Africa's currency into dollars, which is currently at around 14 Rand and 40 cents odd against the US dollar, and then buy the US crude at around $85 a barrel. So all of those factors in order to get to South Africa's Brent crude here locally are synonymous and really impactful when it comes to making up South Africa's petrol price. If any of those factors move a little bit too far and jolt ahead, much the same as this has with regards to South Africa's currency, moving at some stage from around 13 Rand and 15 cents right through to around 15 Rand and 40, having seen the emerging market contagion with the effect of Turkey and Nigeria affecting markets severely about 3 weeks ago. That then brings in a massive clog into South Africa's system as well. The oil price, having sat between $70 and $75 a barrel for the longest time, has now firmly moved right above that mark to well beyond $80 a barrel and even to $85. And that's truly because of Donald Trump and his messages to OPEC, and OPEC retaliating and saying, we will not listen to you.
Yeah.
So those are the key factors. And because South Africa is a big importer of oil, it does become a big problem for our fuel price.
And we know it's just a little after 5 p.m. Chile time for many people. I see cars, coming through. So when we cross back to you in a short while, please speak to some of the motorists. Let's hear what plans do they have to make sure that they sort of tighten their belts. Thank you so much there to our reporter, Arabile Gumede. He is at one of the filling stations here in Johannesburg. Moving along now, South Africa needs to invest